remind members this meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the public and press today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else wish to view it. Just to confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notifications or requests to use the Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, may I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you want to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when not talking so there aren't any interruptions encountered. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to the agenda. Could Geraint, our Democratic Services Officer, confirm if we have received any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Cathy Evans and from Michelle Jones.
Thank you.
Can I just add, is Dermot's given his apologies. He's had to go to leadership team meeting this morning, and Debbie from the Eas will be late because she has a meeting as well, but she will be in attendance.
Thank you, Leanne. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 2, which is the declarations of interest. And I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest to declare. I've got Councillor Burnett on my top of my list, but I can't see him on the line at the moment. Councillor Glencairn?
Nothing to declare, thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Evans isn't here. Councillor Jones, Janet Jones?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor John Killick?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Richard Overton?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Jessica Powell?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Colette Thomas?
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Victoria Haller?
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Thank you. And Michelle Jones isn't with us. And I'll add myself to the end. I don't think I've got any declarations of interest either. So, takes us to the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November 2021. Just to remind members, these minutes relate to the report we received on the Education Self-Evaluation, the SER. Please could I ask members to confirm that the minutes are an accurate account of the meeting, and if anyone wishes to state anything, let me know now. Best if I put my hand icons up. There we go. No? Okay. Can I ask anyone if they agree with these minutes? Okay. Anyone against the minutes? No. Any abstentions? No. I think I'm on the right page here, yeah. Agenda item 4, which is the action sheet. Please could members confirm if they have any questions and whether they are happy with the action sheet. Similarly, anybody against? Or wishing to abstain? They're noted, thank you.
Chair, can I?
Yeah, sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry. It's I keep my hand keeps coming on and off. It's my problem. Yeah, I'm still unhappy with the response regarding what youth service does. I'm interested to know where there are 27 projects. I'm sorry, I haven't actually got the note in front of me. That's what I was just hunting around for just then. But I can't see, or I have been unable to see 27 projects that are happening outside of school hours, which was the question that was asked. It was during the 51 minutes that young people are, on average, are not in school or in education or learning or training. That was the question that I asked. Now, if there are 27 things going on in those times, all well and good, but I would like to know where they are, please, in detail.
Thank you, John. Leanne, you did attempt to get those, didn't you? A couple of times.
Yeah, I sent the response through, but I think Councillor Killick is saying he's not happy with further clarification.
Right. I think what we're looking for is a list of the youth activities. Is it, John? All 27 of them.
I'm looking for the work that is going on. I say in the time when young people are not in education or learning, because the reason I'm asking for it is that the work that used to go on outside of school time was in times when the youth service has never had sufficient staff, but it had probably more staff than it does now. I understand that the amount has been cut back. If it's been cut back, I would have expected that cutback to be reflected in times when young people are not in school, since actually the number of people working in schools hasn't been cut back. Now, it would seem bizarre to me that if youth service is offering a service to schools which goes slightly beyond its remit, that is the first thing that would get cut back. So I'm concerned as to. That's why I'm so specific about wanting to know what is happening outside of those hours of learning. So outside of the times between 9 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And I know Kathy is also concerned about that.
Yes, I think the committee showed some concern, wasn't it? So Kathy was more concerned, I think, with the youth service transition for children with disabilities as well, I think. So, yes, Julian, can you help us with this one? Can you deliver that answer to the committee, please?
Certainly, Chair. I'll take that up with Dermot, yeah.
Thank you. And can we have it as soon as possible, because this has rolled on a little bit. We did request it a couple of meetings ago.
And Chair, it is specifically relating to open access work, and therefore it's that universal service that youth services are supposed to give, not where it's specific to a small group of people within the borough. It's where it's open to all.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, sorry, Chair, to go on about that.
No problem.
Obviously, my question wasn't specific enough the last time.
Thanks very much, John. Julian will get that for us. So we'll go on to agenda item 5 now, which is the EAS business plan. The purpose of this report is for members to consider and provide comments on the contents of the business plan as part of the consultation process, and provide a written response to the EAS as appropriate. I must say it was a draft education EAS business plan. So may I welcome Ed Price, Kath Brown, Julie Wood, Assistant Directors, Kirsty Bevan, Helen Powell, Principal Improvement Partner. Debbie Hartfield isn't with us yet, I don't think, but she will be joining us soon. Managing Director. We're all from the EAS. Julian Durabchuk is the head of the Local Authority School Improvement Team. Dermot isn't with us at the moment. From the Local Authority Service to the meeting. That was a long welcome. We're outnumbered this morning. Can I ask officers if they provide members with a brief overview of the main points within the report? And can you just take about 10 minutes to do this, please? Thanks very much. Who are we starting with, Ed? Oh.
Julian, I don't know whether you're going to say a few words first of context with the relationship with the EAS.
Yeah.
And Torvine Local Authority.
Basically, I think in terms of the EAS business plan this year, we've had a lot of consultation with a wide range of groups from head teachers through to directors and assistant directors in terms of reviewing and looking at the EAS business plan and its vision from 22 to 25. We have been fully engaged in that work ourselves as well. So, and in fact, we have another session scheduled for tomorrow morning as well, Chair. So we've worked very, very closely with the EAS to ensure that going forward, I think it's the challenge that all local authorities are facing at the moment, where the changes to systems, provision, the curriculum and everything, they've all come at once. And it's how the key to it all is how we measure the progress and the provision for each and every one of our schools. And as I said, there's been an awful lot of collaboration and joint working in this, and we've reached a critical point, I think, in the process where the fundamentals are there now, and we're now looking to address, specific details around things like impact capture. But certainly, it's been a collaborative partnership approach between the local authorities, and not just Torfaen, but the others in the region as well, with the EAS. So, we commend the approach in terms of work in there.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you, Chair. If you're ready for me, what we've done this morning, I need to explain the range of colleagues in the room. That's because we know that you like to ask a range of very detailed questions on some of the core elements of the business plan. So rather than one person have answers to all of those, we've got the assistant directors from various areas who may well be able to assist and answer your questions in more detail, is the plan there. So they'll come in as needed on the questions. Debbie Hartveld is the managing director. She should be with us shortly. She's unfortunately in a Welsh Government meeting, which he had to attend. I cleared with Leanne last week that it might be advisable to show a short PowerPoint for that 10-15 minutes at the start, which will hopefully bring some life to the business plan, doesn't introduce new information. Apart from a couple of, there's a copy of this available for you, I understand, that can be shared with members. There's a couple of new bits of information which we've done in response to feedback from other stakeholders, which we felt was critically important, which I will take you through towards the end of my presentation. So you should all be able to see the customary green slides on screen of the AS business plan, a 3-year business plan for the first time, with detailed 1-year business plan supporting that. We've reviewed the way we've written it, and this business plan, it is a relatively short document that is intended for public consumption. We've worked with people to support us in terms of taking advice and guidance on a broader consultation process, making the language more accessible, making it more meaningful for all stakeholders, including parents. There will be a children's version of this business plan as well when it's in its final form, and we very much welcome your views on the draft, which will then inform the final business plan ready for the 1st of April 2022. We very much want to be held to account for what we do, for the delivery of what we do on behalf of the local authority with the statutory responsibility. And on some of the slides at the end, you'll see the work we've undertaken already in response to that on some of the impact statements and strengthening those and increasing the detail of impact that we can provide into you as scrutiny members throughout the course of the year, and the 3-year cycle. We're supporting LA priorities, and it's very much, whilst many of those LA priorities are common, there are specific ones to Torfaen as well, and we support those LA strategic priorities through our business plan. The next line is that we have undertaken adopted the theory of change model, not in detail for those of you who are familiar with it, but it's a common business practice development model to help us articulate the changes and the impact that we want to have, and I'll cover some of that shortly. It's important to highlight that there are connections as well, that the EAS alone, the local authority alone, an individual school alone cannot have impact. It's where we connect and work together as organisations to support, with governing bodies as well, with a critical function in holding the school leadership to account to make sure that the behaviours are right to make change realisable. So the fundamentals will not change. I've touched on those LA strategic plans that drive the local need, our availability to report into you. We're setting this against the context of considerable change in terms of accountability arrangements, which you'll be aware of. I touched on when I last presented data. I've written a scrutiny report which is available to all LAs as well on the accountability arrangements and how they are evolving from Welsh Government. So those scores on the doors that we would have known them as in terms of end of key stage output aren't there in the way they were before, not just because of COVID, it was the direction of travel anyway. And the key element is that accompanying the final version, there will be a range of supporting documents as well. This is not a detailed delivery plan. Our detailed delivery plan this year runs to 600 odd lines of detailed action in an Excel spreadsheet, but that's not that's not going to be meaningful for stakeholders such as parents or schools when we look at the detail of what's happening. And that initial feedback, which I will cover off at the end. Some of these slides I'll go through quite rapidly, noting your point, Chair, on the timings to give you time to ask questions. The regional business plan is formulated from those Welsh Government strategic aims and the local authority strategic education plans. And as Julian alluded to earlier, it's an iterative consultative joint process between officers in the local authority and the AS on how this plan has been formulated in the autumn. We held visioning sessions as well, facilitated by Floyd Woodrow, someone we're working with external, to gain the views of stakeholders. Yourselves included, quite possibly may well have attended those as members. Chairs and governors invited a separate session for LA directors, school improvement leads. And the 5 priorities, I am not going to go through them, but one of the key points, it is about the renewal and reform post-COVID, clarity on those roles and responsibilities, and that clear vision for shaping the future, and the fact that leadership, including governance, underpins it all. What we're aiming to achieve, and this bit, it's in the draft business plan, but it's not actually finalised yet because we're going through a process with LA officers of whether we can look, and this may not be possible, whether we can look at a collective regional vision above the AS vision, because the AS isn't the region. The AS contributes to the regional aims that we all that you have, and your individual council aims as Torfaen that you have, and we're exploring how that can evolve. It's then that our EAS vision, that supporting enabling schools and education settings to thrive as effective learning organisations, is our overall vision for us in terms of how we work with schools, and that ambition, and based on schools as learning organisations, SLO, based on the work of the OECD, sorry, an acronym in there without it being in full, but the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, and their goal that schools are learning organisations and grow, and we support that growth in schools, school leaders and the people in those schools. So into a little bit more of the detail now. There will always be a universal offer for all professional learning for all schools, which will be absolutely critical, with the focus on the areas that we're responsible for in terms of curriculum, school improvement, well-being, and teaching, leadership and pedagogy as the critical areas. So that holistic offer, working with individual schools through school improvement partners. You'll notice a change in name there from the previous challenge advisor, and the right focus on working alongside schools, yes, challenging where necessary and where required, but in a supportive role with schools. Then in addition to that universal offer of specific and targeted support aligned to the school development plan for those schools who need it, worked out through ongoing professional dialogue with school improvement partners. Helen is the principal school improvement partner, Julian as the school improvement lead in the local authority, so that we're working together to determine the support that each individual school in Torfaen needs, and then bespoke support for those schools who may be causing more concern, who require that more intensive support, again brokered through the SIP but agreed by all partners, and heavily involving the chair of governors and through to the governing body on there. So that's those 3-tiered approach to support, which is explained in the business plan as well. In terms of our 3-year activities, I've touched on these, but the 5 areas that we are looking at, with an assistant director looking after these areas of school improvement, the leadership and teaching and the pedagogy and the professional learning, or the right training in old words, for all staff in schools. Curriculum for Wales and the developments there, because that is ongoing, and those requirements on schools and the right approaches for schools to develop their curricula. And then health, wellbeing and equity, working closely with colleagues in ALN in the local authority, and the ALN responsibilities that still sit very much with the local authorities, but without that health, well-being and equity in place, learners can't achieve. And then governors obviously underpinning all of that as the key leadership of the school leaders within school. In terms of impact, and I'll unpick this in a little bit more detail a little bit later, but cover this slide fairly quickly. These are our four overarching 3-year priorities for impact that are expressed at a high level of the impact that we want to have on the school system. So we're supporting, enabling leaders, governors to develop their knowledge, skills and behaviours. Professional learning is of the highest quality and appropriate to the need of individuals and schools, and that the support is aligned to the needs of enabling schools and education settings to make the progress required, and the broad range of collaborative networks that we work alongside and the partners in schools we use to deliver aspects of our work are a key part of a self-improving system. We recognise that those are high level, and there is ongoing work, which I'll touch on later, to report more detailed, granular information and make that available to scrutiny committees so that you can see the progress that is being made in year. If we return to you more regularly, you know that schools are making progress and that there are no surprises as well, I think, in terms of schools and the progress they make. And we report those to our governance arrangements as well through JEG, our joint executive group, of which you have members who represent the needs of Torvine. So how we capture our work on a circular diagram on the right, through service evaluative report that we evaluate our progress, if we look at the left-hand side of that, into service detailed delivery plans to support this business plan. As I said, current one, about 600 lines in Excel with the detailed success criteria and milestones that we have, and we're looking at ways in which we can present more of that information that is very Torvine specific to make it available for you for scrutiny purposes. Capture the impact, and that's one of the challenges we're working with colleagues in local authorities at the moment, because impact, the actual cause of impact, can come from many sources, and impact, perhaps you'll all be familiar. Impact we measured in level 2 threshold plus, didn't we? Several years ago, we knew Torvine schools, the level 2 threshold was going up. We had certain schools, we wanted them all to be benchmark quarter 1, competing better than Wales. Those figures are gone in terms of how they can currently be used. So we are evolving and working with colleagues in LAs to create impact measures at what's happening in schools and working with school leaders on that as well. And FADE, sorry, it's another acronym. Our FADE, it's an acronym. It's the focus of activity, the development work and an evaluation of it. There are reports that feed into our evaluation, and making more information from those available to you at a Torvine level is the plan. And then some of the outputs from the bottom are in terms of the reporting, in terms of the public facing information that we make available. Just quickly, some foundations. I'm not going to cover everyone on here, but hopefully you will recognise some of the things that as an organisation we need to be, but local authorities would want to be as well, in terms of passionately committed to Wales and the agenda in Wales. That I'll just cover the next two, but agile, timely and responsive to needs of schools is more critical than ever now, and also being sensitive and flexible and empathetic. We have regular feedback sessions from head teachers to test the temperature of the water out in school, the capacity of schools at the moment, and we know that there are still post-pandemic challenges there for many school leaders, particularly with ongoing staff absences, pupil absences, etc., which are stresses in that system that may not enable all schools to participate as they would wish with school improvement and development activities. We've got to keep a careful eye and monitor that. The fifth one there, this is the last one I'll touch on that on this slide, but welcoming that challenge and review through the papers that we make available to you as a scrutiny committee in Torvine. Some of these assumptions can also be made, and risks really, that all partners understanding the role of the EAS, we're operating with integrity, honesty and trust. I think that fifth one I touched on post-pandemic of schools' education settings positively engaging with us beyond some of the other stresses that they're having at the moment is absolutely critical, that we have to evolve ourselves. Yes, dialogue, discuss with the LA, but come to collective decisions where we're getting schools that perhaps aren't engaging, and that we're providing that penultimate bullet point, our partners such as you, with timely and appropriate information that's specific to Torvine on the progress being made. This slide, sorry, it's a little bit busy for a slide to put in a presentation. I don't, the detail is covered within the business plan, and it's a single page within the business plan, is trying to capture on a single page what we are about in terms of our business plan, working from the vision, through the impact, through the outputs, through the high-level activities that we will do, and then some of the assumptions and foundations that are essential to support that on the right-hand side on a page, so that it can be held by schools, by school governing bodies, as what the AS is trying to achieve through the business plan. We recognise that we're contributing to our EAS vision of supporting and enabling schools and education settings to thrive. Maybe we'll be contributing to LA priorities through your strategic plans there as well. We're aiming for that, supporting and enabling schools and education settings to thrive. We're going to report against those high-level impact statements on the quality of professional learning, the quality of support, the broad range of collaborative networks and how they work. We're not just going to report on those three. We're going to unpick those and provide far more detailed information about the school engagement. And I'll give some examples of that a little bit later in a few minutes. Again, I'm not going to cover off section 4 because you've seen it in the business plan. Section 4 has the 5 areas and the high level activity that will be undertaken at universal, targeted and bespoke level for our schools. The detailed business plan unpicks those further, and success criteria being developed to fit against those as we speak, ready for the final business plan. Nearly there, Chair, in terms of delivery, but I wanted to give you some early feedback from key stakeholders, scrutiny committees such as yourselves, corporate management teams in other LAs, and we will do the same with any feedback from you as well. We haven't fed it into the draft business plan yet, but we will feed it into the final. The requests, one of the main ones, is requests for further detail on measuring impact with explicit success criteria. We are developing those based on the 4 high-level impact statements, and we'll make them available working with LA colleagues, and they will be in the final business plan. We're then looking at the ways in which we report to you and putting milestones in of through the monthly partnership meetings. Many these take place already through LA termly overviews, where we provide the local authority with data on the engagement of all schools, through a growing range of case studies on Torvine specific schools as well, through scrutiny reports, and I know the range of ones we offer to scrutiny. There's about a menu of about 8 or 9 different reports that we can offer you. We will continue to offer those to you, and our EAS governance reports into our own scrutiny committees as well. And we're aware that in order to meet your needs in terms of your reporting on the impact of the local authority, we need to refine those existing processes to provide a range of more quantitative and qualitative information in the forms of it's a phrase we've adopted from someone we're working with, stats and stories, so statistics and the case studies, which I'll give some examples of. A request to ensure the plan adequately addresses the COVID. I think our last business plan was called a COVID recovery plan. We were trying to move on from that. We do reference COVID, but perhaps we needed to strengthen the way in which it was referenced and acknowledge the impact on schools. And then the final element is, and we're going to work with some external communication partners on the language, ensuring it's accessible for all. So in terms of success criteria, we want to be setting, or we will be setting, this is an example where schools and educational settings engage in professional discussion with the AS and the LAA and the LA to set the right priorities. School improvement partners then work alongside those schools to undertake the range of activities. We measure that school is working as an effective learning organisation. They have Curriculum for Wales as appropriate priorities within their school development plan. Schools and education settings engage with professional learning where they need it in terms of the support to ensure they're on the right development. Or another example, all schools and educational settings are engaged in RADI, Raising Achievement of Disadvantaged Youngsters, a specific programme with several Torvine secondary schools involved. Those examples, we will measure the progress of those through monthly partnership meetings with Julian and other LA colleagues. Termly reporting of overviews, which we will strengthen with stats and stories. I'll give you some example on the next slide, and that offer of any bespoke scrutiny reports that you desire on any aspect of our work. Happy to come along, or colleagues to come along and report on our own governance reports. Bear with me on this next slide. Okay, we realise that the detail on there is incredibly small, but we wanted to try and fit in 2 pages. This is very Torvine specific, and it is a reflective on what has happened over the last year, reflecting on the Torvine strategic priorities, the 4 above. What we have done, myself and 4 other colleague ADs and their teams, have looked at the range of data that we have on Torvine schools that perhaps we might not have actually surfaced to you as a scrutiny committee in the past, but it will help we feel in the future, give you perhaps some of the headline key information that you know and security you need on the progress of Torvine schools in Torvine, that schools in Torvine are engaging in each of those areas. I won't cover every one of those, but you can see there's sort of statistics of the number of Torvine schools engaging, the percentage, where possible, how it relates to regional rates. But if I give a couple of extracted examples that you can see, because it's larger, Leanne, I think we're going to get this presentation to members so you can have a look at all the stats and stories in detail. But for example, 11 head teachers in Torvine, nearly half there, engaging in system leadership across the region as school improvement partners, compared to 5 the previous year. So last year, the number of Torvine head teachers who are whose work is good enough to share, for want of a better phrase, or significantly strong enough to work and support others has grown considerably as their own capacity has grown. Also, the fact that we fund that work as well. So those 11 head teachers aren't out there doing that work on goodwill alone, because it shouldn't be like that. They are funded to do that so they can backfill into releasing the deputy head teacher for more time for leadership work, etc. And that work is ongoing and they're increasing. 8 schools in Torvine contributed to school improvement case studies on turnaround leadership and the success of learning network schools, and those schools listed there. So perhaps making those case studies available for you as scrutiny members so you can see what's actually going on and share the successes, I think is critical for you and would be helpful for you as members, so you can see actually what's going on in your wards and areas in those schools, as well as across the borough as a whole. The second page, this is the second page in the 3 areas of the Curriculum for Wales, Health, Wellbeing and Equity, and Governors. Some of the statistics and stories as well, which we develop, they're there on a page. We will make them available to you in more detailed forms that you can use and reuse to help you with the narrative, help LA officers with the narrative of the journey that many of our schools are on. So my final slide, Chair, apologies, it's been a little bit longer than you requested, but hopefully some interesting information for you. The key bits that we continue the consultation process with directors, JEG, company board. Many of this has taken place in the autumn as well. Feedback, that date of the 11th of February, we welcome from you, and I know as a committee you've always provided us very detailed written feedback. Next steps there of those, that's SUC planning days, SUC South East Wales Consortia with the LA directors. That planning continues for the detailed business plan, LA strategic priorities and the process you go through, and those detailed delivery plans to be finalised, and we will take into account any consultational questions now into the final business plan. John Vow, Chair. We're happy, myself and colleagues, to take any questions.
Thank you, Ed. And we have a list of questions that we prepared at our pre-agenda, so I think we'll, if everybody's happy, go straight into those. It may duplicate a couple of things that you said on the slides. Obviously, we went through the business plan, not the slides. We did have a brief outline of the slides for our meeting yesterday because they came in late the day before. So we go straight into the questions now. I've got the first one, and you did actually touch on it on one of your slides. But in paragraph 1.3, you state that the business plan spans a 3-year period and that annual reviews will be received each year. Can I ask who will receive details of these annual reviews, please?
Yes, we would put them to colleagues in a local authority. They would go to the Director of Education, and it's then into Torfaen democratic processes as you see fit. If for scrutiny you feel that those it would be beneficial for you to see those reports, then they would be available for public consumption, is what I would say. So they will be fit and in a purpose for sharing with you.
Thank you for that. I've got the next one as well. I must have asked a lot of questions on this meeting. How will you ensure priorities?
Sorry, apologies, Chair. I can see my colleague Kirsty Bevan's hand has come up to possibly add to that my answer.
Right, and I see John Killick's there now. So, Kirsty, do you want to come in or do you want John to come in first?
Thank you, Chair. Happy for Councillor Killick to go first.
Yeah, Councillor Killick, just in case Kirsty can answer any of your questions.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I just wanted to ask a specific about what Rose has just raised. In the report, in your report for the future, you talk about the satisfaction with the levels of input from the past, which I guess is something that you would want to emphasise in a review. And it refers to a very high percentage of people who are satisfied, and I think it was 49% who are extremely satisfied. I'm interested, two things about that. When do you undertake that evaluation of the outcome of your work in order to assess satisfaction, and who undertakes it, please?
Kirsty, do you want to come in now?
Yes, yeah, I will do. Thank you, Chair. Going back to your point, Councillor Seaborn, I think it's important to note that we systematically provide a range of evaluation reports to the local authority during the course of the year. So it's not just a 1-year, end-of-year kind of summative evaluation of the business plan. So there are ongoing opportunities throughout the year for us to provide information to you, and that information is obviously systematically shared with the local authority. So just to add to Ed's point, Councillor Killick, in terms of your question, we undertake a survey, an annual survey on the EAS as a whole. So that's done on an annual basis. But in terms of participation, engagement levels, we do lots of analysis based on individual professional learning events over the course of the year as well. So we gather all of that data to inform how we move forward. So it's not just a one-off in terms of your how and when. Hope that answers your question.
So, Chair, yeah, specifically, I was interested in those events that you referred to, and when because I guess that is where you're going to get the large numbers from. When the evaluation of those takes place, I'm painfully aware of how if you do your evaluation at the end of an event, the group dynamic is such that you're very likely to get a very high level of positive assessment, whereas when it's sunk in sometime later, the situation might be a little bit more critical in how it views the event.
Absolutely, Councillor Killick. So in response to that, can I give you an example, because that may be easier? So we run a range of leadership programmes, for example, across the region, and one of those is the Middle Leadership Programme. So we may deliver that middle leadership programme to a number of middle leaders in a secondary school. So, for example, we'd work with Crossy Caeliog and work with about 10 to 15 middle leaders. What we would do is undertake a survey at the start, and then we would regularly, we call them pulse points. So we would take the feedback from participants at regular intervals during that programme, because as you said, we need to be flexible and responsive, because if that programme isn't working for them, we need to change and adapt and bespoke that model. So there are a range of different questionnaires, polls, pulse points that we use for different programmes. So not just a one-off event. And those help us to be flexible and adaptive moving forward as a service.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thanks, Councillor Killick. My next question is, how will you ensure priorities within the business plan remain timely and relevant over the 3-year period for Torfaen? Will there be an opportunity to amend priorities due to emerging issues? And how will you ensure this is captured? Who's going to answer that one?
Shall I come in there, Chair, to start off with? So
Yeah.
I think in terms of the last 2 years...
Sorry, Kirsty, I can see Debbie's, Debbie's hand's gone down. Apologies.
Over the last 2 years, I think we've been extremely responsive as an organisation. So 2 years ago, Ed and I were talking about it today. We came to present our business plan to you in around, I think, February 2020. And by March, obviously with the start of the pandemic, we had to change those plans. So I think as an organisation, over the last 2 years, we've proven that we can be flexible, we can be timely, we can be responsive, and that's what we will continue to do. So if these priorities do need to change, we need to be flexible. But I think under those overarching high-level activities within the business plan around professional learning, around curriculum for Wales, around school improvement, around governance, those won't change, wellbeing and equity, but we may need to change the level of activities that we undertake. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Kirsty. Julian, you got a comment?
Yeah, just to add into the Chair, that basically, you know, we've just reviewed our priorities as a service as well, and are going through that process. We met with the head teacher strategic group yesterday to share with them, and obviously we'll go through the process, the rest of the democratic processes. The AS are aware, and you know, and they will do as they've always done in the past. We work together in a close partnership, you know, to ensure that the support is provided that will cover off basically the priorities contained in our service plan as well. So it's just to sort of substantiate really what Kirsty said. You know, throughout the last 2 years, I think both the education service and the AS have been very proactive in listening to, you know, the head teachers, for instance, around things, and amending practice accordingly. So I don't see any issues going forward with that, in being reactive to any changes that might occur with ongoing priorities.
Thank you, Julian. Councillor Karen, you've got the next question.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of two questions, really. It revolves around paragraph 3.9 on page 23 of our report, page 5, I think, of what might be your report. And it says there, if schools and educational settings have capacity to secure improvement and engage with the support available from the EAS, the expected impact will be as follows, and then you list the points. So I've got two questions, really. How do you measure this impact, particularly whether that learning is of high quality and pertinent to the needs of each individual school? And my other question coming out of that is that big if at the start of the whole thing that says, if schools and educational settings have the capacity to secure improvement. I can never remember seeing a report either from the LA or the EAS giving us specific schools that have not been engaging. Yet Ed mentioned in his preamble, if you like, that there are schools that aren't engaging. Where do reports about schools that aren't engaging go, and how will you ensure that the impact is of that high quality and pertinent to each individual school?
Kirsty.
Thanks, Councillors Karen. It's a difficult question to ask, isn't it? How do we measure the impact? And we measure that in a range of different ways. So Ed made reference in the past to us using cold data, end of key stage data collectively to look at the impact on schools. But actually, we have a range of qualitative and quantitative information about our schools that hasn't come to the forefront, but we have a range of that information. So examples of that could be looking at school development plan priorities with head teachers, working alongside them to make sure the support is aligned to those priorities, and then looking collectively at the progress that schools are making against those priorities by us undertaking, for example, self-evaluation activity alongside leaders, going into schools, undertaking things like book scrutinies, listening to learners, alongside leaders so that we can measure progress. And impact doesn't have to just be numbers. So impact can be a range of different things. And Ed made reference in the presentation to things like changes in behaviour. So, for example, if an individual went on a professional learning event, how has that individual's behaviour changed? Have they increased their skills and knowledge? And how then have they changed their practice in school as a result of undertaking that professional learning? So I think there's a whole host of things that we can evidence in terms of the impact. And also Ed in his presentation made reference to case studies, and those can be really useful for certain schools, such as Crossy Caeliog, for example, to evidence its improvement journey over time, because it wasn't actually one thing or one silver bullet, if you like, that made improvements with that school. And this links me back to my if, Councillor Karen, because actually, if we use the example of Crossy Caeliog and leadership capacity, what we need as a service is to work with a leadership team who have the capacity to secure improvement. So that's what we mean, as in if schools are ready and able to engage in that support and make progress. So that's the if question. And in terms of the schools you talked about not engaging, so every term we provide on a termly basis, we call them termly overviews. They include a whole host of information about schools who are engaging, for example, in professional learning, and those who are not, those who we're having difficulty engaging with. So we share that information with the local authority, and on a monthly basis, we have what we call partnership meetings. So that information is regularly shared, and then the local authority will often pick up discussions with those schools where engagement is not as it should be. So Julian, I don't know whether you wanted just to come in on that end question. Councillor Karen, happy to come back in if I haven't covered any of the other points.
Yes, and I think, I suppose in a nutshell, from whether it's research or experience, across other authorities, but we know what good leadership looks like. We know what good teaching and learning delivers. And it's about whether schools have those systems and behaviours in their setting to enable the learners, to fulfil their potential. And I think we do have an absolute wealth of data from the Eas and both ourselves through wider group as well. And those meetings are absolutely crucial because it pulls together those meetings in a succinct fashion around schools. And I think the one for me this year, for instance, which is proving really, really informative, are the new SDP professional discussion meetings. Kirsty has mentioned the fact about looking at school development plans. Well, it's not just looking at the plan and whether it's a well-written plan. It's actually going way, way beyond that and looking at how the school is evaluating itself, assessing the quality of teaching, learning, and so on. And then we are asking to see the evidence. And quite often, following those meetings, it'll mean that either Helen or the school improvement partner will go in and do a specific review to actually get the evidence on the ground as well. So it's a new approach, if you like. As Ed has alluded to, we've shifted away from, if the school was in benchmark Q1 for all its performance measures, the assumption was it was a good school. But it not necessarily was. It might have been good at playing games, for instance. Whereas now, I think the rich information that the Eas provide us through the works of the SIPs, the reviews, our monthly meetings, we're actually able to get into the skin of the school. And as the programme rolls out this year, I think, we really know our schools well now, and the depth of knowledge is allowing us to be more proactive, perhaps, than we were in the past.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Kirsty? Oh, no. Sorry, you're muted.
On mute, Kirst.
First one.
Sorry, there's always one. Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I suppose, from an EAS perspective, the information isn't new. So we've always had a range of information about our schools. And it's probably how that is being used now, moving forward, in a different way. But that information has always been systematically produced by us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Karen, I think that's next question of yours was touched on. Is there anything left in question 5 that you need clarification on?
Question 4, yeah. Well, it is really. Because question 4 was aimed at the local authority, and it said, "How will you ensure that the EAS has measured the impact of support they are providing across our schools appropriately?" But I think I'd like to slightly alter that really and aim it at Julian, in the sense that, as I said at the beginning of my earlier question, if schools and educational settings have the capacity, well, I don't think the local authority or the EAS has ever reported back to us to say that there are schools that aren't engaging and there are schools that don't have the capacity. So my sort of question is that, I suppose, will you in future come back to us and name and shame schools that aren't working with the local authority and the EAS in a useful capacity, really?
If I can respond to that, Chair. I think in the past, judgments, whether they were national categorisation or whatever, were solely based on data. With a little bit of other subtle nuances thrown in. And as Kirsty said, this data has always been available. It's always been provided by the EAS. But because the data was there, the data, was the key driver. I think moving forward, I'd like to say it's not about naming and shaming. That moving forward, literally, if you look at the new school improvement guidance that's come out through Welsh Government, and the EAS we've got the regional approach in now for school improvement guidance as well, based on that, which has been pulled together, again by the head teachers across the region. It's now about this ongoing dialogue and this openness and honesty. And I think and this is a strange phrase, where we've benefited in COVID, our relationships with our schools to sit down and problem solve in an open, honest fashion, we need to foster that and draw that through into the school improvement agenda and have those open and honest conversations with our schools based on this range of information. So it's not about naming and shaming. It's at different points. Any school may need to have support with leadership at various levels or the quality of teaching and learning. And it's about identifying that and having the dialogue with the school to put the right, and the EAS, to put the right level of support in so that school can move forward in a timely fashion.
Thank you. Deb, you wanted to speak? Welcome.
Good morning. Apologies for joining the meeting late. Just to follow up on that, Councillor Karen, I think as from an EAS perspective, I think we only come to see you once a year as a scrutiny committee, and we are more than happy to come more regularly to talk to you about our joint work with schools and with the local authority around that improving school piece. And as Julian said, it's not about naming and shaming, it's about absolutely showing how, as a partnership, we're working with school leaders to help them to improve. Ultimately, the people that improve schools are the people in schools. We're here to help to influence and to shape that improvement. So it's an offer, whether that be through a formal setting or a briefing session, however that meets your needs, really.
Thank you for that, Deb.
If I could come back, Chair, perhaps I used a poor term really when I said naming and shaming, but what I meant by that was, I don't know if you caught the original question, Debbie, but I was looking at 3.9 on page 23 of the report that said, if schools and educational settings have the capacity to secure improvement. And Ed did mention during his preamble that there are schools that aren't engaging. My point really was that I don't think the only time the educational committee find out there's a problem is when we see a poor Esting report. Nobody.
You're frozen, Glyn. Glyn, I don't know whether you can hear us. We can't see you or hear you.
He's frozen for everyone, Chair, I believe.
Yeah. Okay, well, you may well have to log out and log back in. John Killick, do you want to carry on with... Oh, you have asked your question, or do you want to...
Well, mine is... it may help Glyn's question here, I don't know. My question is about the use of the word capacity, which can be used to mean so many different things in so many different ways. And I suppose what I'm saying is, can we have something a little bit more precise than that? Because I don't really know if you're talking about numbers of staff, numbers of managers, ability of staff, ability of managers, peculiarity of a year group. There's a whole number of things that it can be used to mean. And yeah, so what I'm saying is I don't really understand that paragraph because I don't know what capacity is being used to mean in that case.
What have we got? We've got Julian coming.
If I just go back to Councillor Karen's point first, and then try and address Councillor Killick's point as well. In terms of the new systems, right at the beginning of lockdown, we had the council partnered review, which raised some issues around communication with members and so on. Now we have put in place as of this year, because of the new approaches to trying to gather all this rich information. We've been producing for the last 2 terms, putting together the termly progress document that goes out to members. So, and if you look on that, one of the things, if I use an example, for instance, through our SDP meetings, one of our primary schools, which has been traditionally, a green school, we've had some concerns is too strong a phrase, but there's obviously issues that need addressing in the school around sort of self-evaluation and planning. So we've actually now allocated that school as part of the new team around the school approach, so we can put additional support in. And I think coming back to the whole process, we are now using this wealth of information to be more proactive. So, as a school that would have been traditionally green in the past, we're now going to put additional support in. And I think in terms of the capacity issue, I'm sure Debbie will add to this in a moment, but I think in terms of the generic bit, it is about the capacity. And then when we talk about individual schools, then we can be more specific. So, for instance, with Croeso-Ceiliog School, we all know the capacity was in the senior most leadership within the school. And that was addressed to be able to address the leadership behaviours and the systems behaviours in the school. In other schools, the capacity may well be at a different level in terms of support and intervention, for instance, for recovery. But those specific issues of capacity would be clarified then on an individual school basis. So that's the point I would make, Councillor Killick.
Thank you, Julian. Deb? I think Glyn Karen's joined us again now. So
Sorry about that.
Okay, just is it okay to come in, Chair? Yes, just to pick up on Councillor Killick's point around capacity. It means all those things, actually, Councillor Killick, that you mentioned. And your point is a point well made. We will look at a way of making sure that that sentence, that word, is explained in a way that is more clearly understood. That's the purpose of this consultation. So thank you for that feedback. We can work on that. For me, when I think about capacity, I think about the ability for everyone in that school to be able to secure change and improvement, but that possibly is, again, too wordy. So we will look at that, Councillor Killick, and try to simplify it in the final version that comes out to yourselves. And I know that Councillor Karen has come back into the room. I think I can see him. And I'm going to try to pick up on the point that Councillor Karen made around
if schools engage. I think that was the point, Councillor Karen. I think I'd just like to pick up on that and say that there is a raft of information that we provide back into the local authority, and sometimes there are reasons for non-engagement, but it's about understanding what those reasons are. And when we want to put support into a school, we want to get the best value for money, as I'm sure you do. So we want to be able to ensure that it's going into the right place at the right time. And that's everything around that timely support. And sometimes there's a bit of work that needs to happen before, let's say, for example, we go and work with a maths department. Maybe we need to work with a leadership team in the school to start with, to make sure that they are completely on board, completely able to make those changes in the maths department once our team go in and work with them and secure and help that improvement to take place. So it's about things happening in the right sequence to enable that change to take place. And your point about you only get to know when things are not right, possibly through an Estin report, as a good example. I think possibly there's things that are beyond the AS's control within that, and some things that possibly, as I've said, that there may be some opportunities for us to come with, obviously, Julian and Dermot to talk to you about schools in more detail, possibly outside of these meetings. But again, as I've said, we're welcome to come and share all the information that we have with you at your convenience.
Thank you, Deb. And now we've got the Schools Monitoring Committee up and running. We may well be calling you in a little bit more once we get some information from that. Right, Glyn, you had some of question 5 answered. Do you want to go back over question 5 and then we're back on track then?
No, well, I obviously didn't hear the answer, but this will be available for recording later. But I take it about capacity, because obviously my issue, I obviously come back and call part of that. And obviously my issue there is, you know, it does say all schools, and it was worrying for me that, I mean, I am aware that you've lost 53% of your staff. And I'm also aware that you are trying to do a lot more school-to-school contact, but obviously there's a limit to how much time heads can spend out of their own school. There's also a limited capacity within the EAS. So I just, you know, it was that phrase, all schools will continue to be provided with bespoke support. I think that the phrase itself sort of lifts expectation higher than I think the EAS can provide. So just a matter of really semantics, I suppose.
I have to completely disagree. I feel that we're in a very strong position, stronger position than we have been previously, to be able to provide all schools in Torfaen with bespoke support. Councillor Karen.
Okay. Councillor Collect, do you want to come on with your question 6?
Yeah, please. So following on from the previous question, I'm interested in this notion that the support is so bespoke, and I'm wondering, aren't there some themes or priorities that run across all schools that you would want to say in an overarching report or develop action plan that we're discussing here? That you would want to have some kind of specifics that relate to all, not all schools, but a large majority of schools. And I'll give us an example, that of behaviour management. And I'm just, for me, I'm surprised that in your report, there isn't anything that says we will offer support on school behaviour, the behaviour management within schools across the borough, because it seems to be something I never speak to a teacher and say, what are the difficulties you face, without them saying managing behaviour.
Okay, Deb, do you want to come in with that, or one other officer?
Yes, 2 points, I suppose, Councillor Killick. The first one is, yes, there are common themes across schools, and they normally derive from the national priorities. You would expect, for instance, the obvious one to be Curriculum for Wales. And the way that we have those 5 key activity areas around teaching and learning is another one, Curriculum for Wales is another one. You'd expect there to be development for governors. You would expect there to be development around wellbeing and equity and so on. So we provide the service linked to what we know are priorities within those generic priorities within each school improvement plan. Your specific example around behaviour management, whilst we touch on attitudes to learning and those key skills that teachers need to engage learners, the behaviour management processes fall within the roles and responsibilities of the local authority. So that would be something that the local authority would offer as a service into schools and not the EAS. We would pick up on learning behaviours and behaviour techniques within that. But we don't offer a behaviour management service. That's the local authority. Maybe Julian would want to come in on that point. I'm not sure.
Yeah, behaviour management is solely as a local authority responsibility. Debbie's absolutely right in terms of attitudes to learning. Then, you know, you can touch on that through teaching and learning, because obviously good teaching engages learners, so from that aspect. But in terms of out and out behaviour management, that's the statutory responsibility around the local authority and around the inclusion team and behaviour support there. So the EAS would not be expected to provide any, support into schools on that.
On a supplementary, what if our staff require training in behaviour management? Is that the responsibility of the LA or the EAS? If it's a skill that the staff require?
In fact, this term, Chair, we've actually, over the last 12 to 18 months, we've actually provided 3 of our schools with external training for staff on behaviour management, where behaviour issues were identified through exclusion data, for instance, through the inclusion team. So yes, we do provide that as a local authority, and we have 3 examples within the last 12 to 18 months where that's actually happened.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just come back on that?
Certainly.
I think that both of you have talked about the role of the authority with regards to dealing with bad behaviour, and that's not actually what I'm talking about. I'm talking about whole school approaches across the borough to behaviour, to the management of behaviour, which starts well before any bad behaviour might begin. And that's why I would have expected such an overarching, something which affects the whole of the work in school to be in an overarching plan of this sort.
And again, John, Councillor Killock, that would be the role of the local authority to have a behaviour management strategy. As Julian has said, that's already taken place in 3 schools, I think, Julian, across the local authority, and that is not because it got to the point that you've just described. This is about having a positive behaviour management strategy, which is something that I know the local authority offer to all schools.
Yeah. We actually have that in place, Councillor Killock. So, and again, it depends on individual schools then and the support they need. But that is actually in place across the borough.
Okay.
Thank you. To know that.
My next question is, how have we ensured that the improvement priorities within your business plan aligns with the priorities of each of the local authorities' self-evaluation reports? Anyone? Deb?
Yes, so the same process this year as we've used in previous years. We have copious discussions with Dermot and Julian, as we do with other local authority directors, We had visioning sessions prior to the draft version of the plan that you have for this meeting around the needs of the system. Julian and Dermot were fully part of those discussions, and at that point in time we were working on the priorities that you had as a local authority for the current year. We since have had the self-valuation report and the priorities for the new financial year from Julian and Dermot. And you can see, I know Ed gave you a presentation at the start of this meeting to show you how the long-term plan that we have within the plan that you have as the draft version link explicitly into the priorities and the outcomes of your self-evaluation exercise. And as we iterate those annual priorities, it gives us room to be agile. And Councillor Seaborn, that comes back to, I think, one of your earlier questions where you asked if things change or the direction of your local authority changes or the needs of your school change. We are agile enough to be able to adapt what we're doing under those broad headings to enable us to meet the needs of your schools and settings. So we've used the same process as we've used previously, and we will report systematically, as we have done previously, against your local authority priorities in those termly updates that we provide back to the local authority.
Thank you, Deb. My next question is, how are members able to engage from this plan? What improvement priorities you have specifically defined for Torfaen to be able to determine whether they are, in fact, the most appropriate ones for our local authority? You need me to repeat that?
No.
Julian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think to be fair, Councillor Kay, like we've just updated our priorities for next year, and it literally only within the last several days, I think, I've shared them with the EAS. As I mentioned earlier, we've shared them with the head strategic group yesterday. It's our intention, obviously, then to share them with the rest of the heads and then come up through the democratic process. Through Richard and through members and so forth. So whilst we are continuing to develop those and agree them, there will be ample opportunity through those meetings within Torfaen to amend or shape those. And I think, as Debbie has already alluded to, we are continuing to work very closely together in partnership to ensure that those priorities, however they will change or not, will be incorporated into the EAS business plan priorities and therefore will be met. So it's an ongoing piece of work there, Chair, and the opportunity for members to comment will be afforded now shortly through the process.
Thank you. Deb, did you want to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. I think when you look at, it's on page 36 of your report, when you look at what we're setting out the impact to be across those 4 areas around enabling leaders, governors, all educational practitioners to improve their skills, behaviours, and ultimately improve those learner outcomes, and then moving on to professional learning, moving on to schools making progress. All of those elements of impact link implicitly to your improvement priorities that Julian has just alluded to. All of them over that period of time, you would expect to see those changes. And what we're saying by 2025, that circle of influence that we have as an EAS, we believe we are able to support and influence all of your schools across Torfaen to become effective and thriving learning organisations. And many of your schools are well on that journey, but there are others that are going to need some support to get there. And people change in schools. That's the nature of schools. So it's about bringing everyone with us. So I think everything that we have in this plan at a high level is strategically meeting the needs of the new priorities that you have, and those new priorities are focused around the development of curriculum for Wales, the development of high quality teaching, the development of leaders in the system now and for the future. Let's not forget, you need to grow those leaders across Torfaen, and particularly around those children and young people who have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic and those that were disadvantaged prior to the pandemic. So this plan that you have in front of you, either on that universal level or in really bespoke work with schools, I believe, Councillor Seaborn, meets the needs of your priorities going forward. And we are able to report then to you, if you so wish, on a termly basis about how we are helping you to meet those priorities with your schools.
Thank you, Deb. I think my question 9 is, how are members able to determine whether the appropriate progress has been made in relation to last year's plan? We went through this process last year. How do we know that what we did last year, or even our recommendations, is beneficial? You've even taken any notice, or are we just going through a cycle of rounds and just going through the motions? So.
Yeah, so if I come in there, so since the last plan, we've provided termly updates to officers on the progress, well, on our contribution in your schools to meeting your priorities. So that information has come through termly, and that's continued throughout the pandemic, albeit we had to slightly change direction as we all did. And we also systematically provide updates on the EAS business plan into each of our governance groups. And again, those reports are suitable and available to be shared again with yourselves as a committee. So our reporting mechanisms haven't changed. That's been the route that we've taken for the past 3 years. So again, that information is there in the system for you, if you so wish it, and it'll be exactly the same going forward.
Thank you, Deb. Takes us to Councillor Thomas's question next, please. Question 11.
Thank you, Chair. On page 34 of the report pack, page 8 of the business plan, you state that all schools will be able to access a universal offer of professional learning support in each of the following areas. How many schools have used this support so far? And what has been the impact of offering this professional support within our schools?
Who's going to take that on? Kirsty?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I think because this is a new plan, we wouldn't be measuring the engagement data yet. So this is a draft consultation, obviously, of the business plan, which would come into effect in April. So from April, we'll be able to then systematically provide to the local authority engagement data of which schools have engaged in those professional learning programmes. But looking back, the 2 slides around the statistics and stories, the stats and stories that Ed shared with you this morning, and I know they were really small, and you'll have the opportunity to look at those in more detail, but they will give you examples from last year as a looking back, which also links to the last question, Councillor Seaborn, around evaluation 2, about which schools have engaged. So that data will come for the new business plan, Councillor Thomas, but also we'll be able to provide it for last year's business plan based on the stats and stories.
Thank you.
And when can we expect that, please, Kirsty?
So the stats and stories are available, obviously, for you now. And as Deb said, all those reports from last year in terms of our reporting mechanisms through the governance groups are available, as is the value for money report from last year.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Jones, are you still with us? I know you have to leave pretty quickly, but you can ask your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Referring to page 30 of the report back and page 13 of the business plan, you state that support to develop strategic approaches in developing UNCRC and human rights will be provided. How are you looking to develop and implement this further within our schools?
Anyone? Catherine, sorry. Catherine Bevan.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Jones. We have worked with the Children's Commissioner Office to design a professional learning programme that supports schools to understand the UNCRC rights and human rights, and to embed them as a whole school approach, but also into the curriculum. So we offer a half-termly professional learning session that schools join. We share practice of how some schools have integrated it into their curriculum, how they communicate it with their wider school community effectively, and also how it filters through to their school learning environment. So again, we report the attendance and engagement on all the Torfaen schools on a termly basis, so that Julian is aware of how well the schools are participating in that professional learning programme.
Can you tell us, are all the schools in Torfaen currently involved in this, implementation? Has anyone sort of not engaged in it at the moment? And does that include our primary schools as well as our secondary schools?
Yes, the professional learning offer is available to all primary, secondary and your PRU and special school settings. The engagement is variable across the LA, but that's because it's when it's featuring in their school development plan. We obviously cover all aspects of wellbeing and equity, and we, especially as a result of the pandemic, we are very clear that we say to schools that they need to dip and dive into the professional learning offer appropriate to their school development plan for that existing year. However, we would expect over a 3-year plan that all our areas of wellbeing and equity would be addressed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kat.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other further comments? No, that concludes our questions. So thank you very much, officers. Thank you for taking time out to come to Torfaen this morning, or come to your computers to come to Torfaen this morning. I can ask you to leave now while members deliberate their recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Are we clear, Geraint? Are we all back to normal? Everybody gone? Okay. May I remind members what's been asked of the Scrutiny Committee, which is to consider when coming up with their recommendations. They've been asked to receive the report for information, take the opportunity to comment on the contents of the business plan as part of the consultation process, and consider the main strengths and areas for development within Torfaen, and to consider how LA services can be aligned with the priorities contained within the document, therefore ensuring all pupils meet their full potential. Do members have any specific recommendations that they would like to make on the report? I know we made quite a few yesterday, but we weren't recording those. Glyn.
I two quick comments, if I can. One, it seemed to me that the EAS was saying, we supply you with all of this information. If you're not getting it as an education committee, don't come to us. Go bothering your local authority, because they are obviously not supplying you with the information. Now, whether that's true or not, I think that's something we need to talk to Dermot and Julian about. And the other thing is, I mean, that comment about bespoke for each school. I mean, I did a quick look at their report. I mean, Debbie said to me, we are never been in a better position to supply bespoke support to all our schools. There are 317 schools, 9,691 staff and 3,100 governors. I mean, with the best will in the world, and I wouldn't dream of saying this to Debbie's face, that's bullshit. Yeah. It's bullshit, isn't it? I mean, bespoke support means individual support for each school.
Yeah.
They are supplying support to schools. The schools pick what they want out of the support that they get. It isn't bespoke support. They're not going to a school and saying to them, what do you need? We can give you, and we will give you this, this, and this. They are supplying a broad brush scheme of things.
And you can dip in if you want to.
Yeah. So I still stand by my comment there. They are not supplying bespoke support to all our schools.
No.
But there we go.
Janet, do you want to come? Hang on, microphone.
Sorry, beg pardon.
Yeah.
Just a comment similar to what Glyn was saying. They say they're going to all schools and working with schools, but then she said that there are some schools that they don't want to interact with. Why? What's the reason these schools don't want to interact with EAS? Is there something that they are not doing right? And that really, is a bit of a concern as well.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Leanne, do you want to take us through anything that you picked up?
Sorry, Chair. No, I think on the back of what Councillor Karen said, really, picking up the key thing coming out of that meeting was there's quite a lot of bits of information available which the EAS offered to provide committee members. So I've made a list, the impact, success, criteria, the stats and stories statements. What else was there? Case studies on system leadership progress could also be made available to members, which I think, particularly the school serve, I think they benefit from that information.
Yeah. I seem to recall we've asked for a number of minutes of like the head teachers groups, and that way we would learn information from that. But that hasn't been forthcoming at all. We've asked on a number of occasions for the minutes of these different groups. Colette, do you want to come in? Sorry, Janet, you'll come in a minute.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say Kirsty did offer to come and meet us informally.
Yes.
And I think that's perhaps something we should take up. But I think we do need more information, and I think perhaps the school sub is the best place really for us to delve a little bit more deeply. Although the whole committee should be made aware generally.
Yeah, I think the school subs and then reporting back to the full committee. Janet, did you want to come in? Your microphone's on, sorry. I know you have to go. That's my lip reading. I have to go. Glyn, do you want to come in?
I think Janet's still trying to talk. I think she's on mute. She doesn't.
Sorry. I'm just saying, Chair, do you mind if I leave this meeting now to go to my site meeting? Okay,
my lip reading is very good, yeah. No problem. Thanks for your contribution. Ta-da. Right. Who's next? Glyn, Karen.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in here that they talk about what they measure their impact along with, like FADE reports and impact capture reports. I think it might be useful if, when we are doing school monitoring subcommittee, if we can get hold of, well, it would be useful to just look at an impact capture report for a school anyway, just to see exactly what information they are supplying to the local authority, that the local authority
such that you reduce the chance of behaviour becoming bad.
Yeah.
That to me, it's a bit like, it's a bit like crime. If you can do things that stop crime from happening in the first place, rather than trying to deal with it after it's happened.
Yeah. We don't want reactive,
Yeah,
we want proactive. Yeah. So
that's right.
it's
Exactly
a positive behaviour management. Yeah. Okay. Leanne, did you pick up on anything else?
Sorry, I'm not sure whether we need to just go through because the webcast, we lost signal.
Yeah.
So I think last going off, Councillor Jones, before she left the meeting, asked what are the reasons that some schools are not engaging with the EAS and the support being offered. I think Councillor Seaborn, you requested the head teacher group meeting minutes.
Yeah. And any other, pertinent minutes, the termly meetings with the LA officers. It might be crucial information that we might require and able to take our work forward.
Yeah. Councillor Thomas welcomed the offer for the EAS to meet with members on a regular basis, and I think you were in agreement that maybe that'd be good for school sub-members in particular and the work that they're doing in their programme. Councillor Karen requested the impact capture reports, and again maybe that's something the school sub would find very useful to look at. I don't know if Vicky wanted to say anything in particular with regards to the response. Is there anything?
The sidestepping.
Yeah, it was more just an observation and a comment about the meeting rather than a recommendation. It was.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you just notice it, don't you? You're asking one question, it's not my problem, it's your problem. Yeah. So, talk about partnership working. There we go.
What was on, I'm not sure if it was Councillor Karen or Killett that suggested this, maybe a seminar on behaviour management. And I think Councillor Thomas specifically wants to look at how schools deal with behaviour management and whether they have the capacity to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think Lynn suggested that, it should be a whole authority, maybe a member seminar that we learn how we're handling. It is our responsibility and how are we handling it. So I'm looking at my scribbles to see where.
Yeah, me too.
Whether there's anything else. I think the acronyms is another thing. This is meant to be a consultation document, and unless you're in education, who would know what FADE or any of the other acronyms meant? And they did say, I think Ed said that it is going to be a young person's document, business plan. Perhaps we need to receive that next year, not the one they want us to see.
Chair, this isn't intended to be a sarcastic comment, but even after he told us what the letters of FADE meant, I still didn't understand what it was going to do.
No, I wrote focus activity and I missed the DE bit, but it's focused activity, but there we are. On what, I don't know.
I think there was another thing which Councillor Killett raised around the capacity sentence needing to be clarified better. I think Debbie appreciated, the point that he was trying to make there, and she was going to take that back. So I don't know whether you would like to record that formally within your recommendations.
Yes. Yeah.
Please. Yeah. I mean, the reason that I raise it is that if you come back to an organisation and say, right, where you said that about the capacity of the organisation, and you say, for instance, oh well, it's because of teaching and learning or teaching, they will say, oh no, we were looking at that as being a particular poor year group. It goes back to what Vicky's just talked about dancing around and pushing things. If you say one thing, oh no, we'll argue that. Oh right, it's a Wednesday today, so we'll argue that.
Yeah.
It's one of those words I know that gets used and abused.
Yes, absolutely.
And I've just double checked now, the other reports which they said you might find useful was in relation to Councillor Seaborne's question about what is the progress that's been made on last year's business plan. And she said we have got some stats and story information available now on, you know, what progress was made last year, and also value for money reports. So I don't know whether that's something else you'd like to...
I think that's what we need. We need to know that the money that's going out from our schools is giving them value for money, don't we, you know? And that they're making progress because... Yeah.
Well, I know that the EAS have regular value for money reports, and I see them as part of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee. But I'm not aware that the Education Committee get them. But I mean, they've always been fairly positive about what the EAS is doing. But I think as well we could do with having perhaps a little meeting with Julian and Dermot to sort of discuss this issue that the EAS have said they are supplying us with information.
And we're not getting...
For example, schools that are not engaging, and you know, we're not getting it. So is there information that is pertinent to the Education Committee that's been supplied to the EAS that we're not getting?
Yeah. And then we get criticised from Estin to say that we're not fully informed, and you know, and we've got an Estin inspection coming up. So. I agree, Glyn. Okay. Colette?
Yeah, can I suggest, Chair, that the next time that we look at this business plan, that as we do with when we're doing a scrutiny with other departments, that we ask the schools how they feel about the business plan, and whether they think it captures what they need. We do it to residents when we're doing a consultation, so perhaps we could do it to our schools next time.
Yeah, I agree. We picked that up yesterday, didn't we? Good job, you thought. Yeah. Okay. Any other recommendations that we wish to? I'm echoing it.
I was just thinking, Chair, because this report, the business plan is due to be approved by Cabinet in March. I'm not sure if there's anything specific you would like to recommend to Cabinet to consider before they approve the final plan.
Apart from putting it in the bin, you mean? I thought it's a very difficult plan to follow personally. When I received it, it took me a couple of days to sort of go through it and thinking, what is it all about? But that's my personal opinion. I felt Ed's slides were a lot more explicit, particularly to Torvine. And I think the you know, a 3-year business plan, perhaps the annual reports. I think we need to receive the annual updates on the business plan, and perhaps for them to include progress, impact, outcomes, whatever you'd like to call it.
What are they going to do?
Yeah, and how are they going to do it? How will we know?
When are they going to do it, and how much is it going to cost? That was Glyn's question, that one. Okay, you okay with that, Leanne?
Yeah, so I'm frantically scribbling.
Okay. I think we've done that one to death. I think we also need to think about how we receive this plan next time, and if we're having the annual reports, perhaps that might be easier to take it to the 3-year plan, the following 3-year plan, if it arrives. Okay, that takes us on to agenda item 6. Are you okay?
Just before we move on from that, there was one thing I didn't notice it before. In section 6, there's the business plan is supported by the following documents, and it says detailed business plan. And I didn't realise. I mean, Ed made reference to these huge documents they've got, but it would have been perhaps helpful if if there had been more, you know, if we'd known that that existed, because I'd have certainly tried to have a look at it, but it doesn't indicate where you can find it either.
No.
They thought it was too long for you, Glenn.
Well, yeah, but I'm not saying I'd read every page, but I'd have had a quick, brief look through it to see.
Perhaps it's to come. Perhaps it's after the draft. The more details. I don't know. There we go. Okay, any further
to it?
Sorry?
Could we at least ask for a signpost to that detailed business plan?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments or recommendations that we can think of? No, thanks for that. I thought that was quite a good meeting, but on our side. So, work programme. Eliane, can you go through the report? I don't know. I'm looking at. Could members confirm if they have any questions? We're looking at the work programme, which is the wellbeing offer. It's the PSB, but the PSB is coming to committee tomorrow, I think. Is it?
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, I don't support the PSB scrutiny committee, but I think that's the plan overall, or it could just be a section. Is it to do with
education,
social care that they might be looking at tomorrow? But the PSB objective, which you selected as part of your visioning in October, I think it was, is to do with the wellbeing offer.
Right, okay.
The early interventions, and in particular, how we're progressing against Audit Wales's recommendations that they made as part of a piece of work that they carried out on the PSB objective. So that's the next item.
If you can see that, I don't know whether you can see that. That is the PSB report for tomorrow. It's come apart because the staples didn't go through it. And I'm just wondering whether or not it's timely or whether or not they will discuss that tomorrow.
Not that I'm aware.
Right, okay.
It shouldn't be, because this theme is particularly for the Education Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Okay.
I think the PSB is more generic across the board, you know, it covers cross-cutting areas then.
Yeah. And we're looking to take this on the 16th of March, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Are you happy to take that? Fine. That's okay. Good.
Just to let you know, Chair, I don't know if I've already told the committee members of this, there'll be that report, and I'll also be presenting my annual update on recommendation report, so we can sort of close the loop on all the recommendations that you've made throughout the cycle, and you can determine whether progress has been made appropriately on the recommendations that you put forward.
Oh, that would be good. Okay, that's fine. So we'll take that at the next meeting, which is the 16th of March. That takes us to agenda item 7, which is a reminder of when the date and time of the next meeting is. I haven't got a time, but I'm assuming it'll come through on the Teams.
Yeah, I think most of our meetings are 10 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay, and that leads us to agenda item 8. I'll close the meeting. Can I thank members, officers and invitees for attending and contributing to the meeting? And I now close the meeting. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.